We are the Purple Pandas, and we are doing the 5 Faces of Oppression.
Exploitation is defined by the oppression that occurs when the results of the labor of one social group are transferred to benefit another social group. In our capitalist society, the wealthy class dominates the people who work for them, despite the fact that workers can freely contract with their employers. This process is supported by the structural relation between the two social groups, and this coercive structure gives workers few opportunities to generate their own wealth. The theory of exploitation explains how capitalism systematically transfers the powers of workers to capitalists, depriving workers of their power and self-respect. The labor and energy expenditure of one group that benefits another can be used to represent exploitation based on race and gender. In marriage, the woman's labor benefits men without comparable compensation for women. Women are responsible for taking care of the home and emotionally supporting the family. Women's energies are expended at the home and in the workplace in order to allow men the time and freedom to enhance their status. Blacks and Latinos being segregated into low-paying menial labor work also exemplifies exploitation. There is significant racial structuring in the domestic labor field, and there is a cultural pressure to fill servant jobs such as housekeepers or busboys with blacks and Latinos. On the other hand, skilled menial work is reserved for whites. Menial labor segregation is a racially specific form of exploitation.
Marginalization is the act of relegating or confining a group of people to a lower social standing or outer limit or edge of society. Most commonly, people are marginalized based upon race. Yet, marginalization is by no means the fate only of racially marked people. Others, such as elderly, single moms, and mentally and physically disabled people feel it as well.
There are many different examples of marginalization. One example is a company could refuse to hire a disabled person, making it much more difficult for them to find a job, and the only reason they refuse to hire them is because of their disability. Another example is firing the elderly, even though they might still be competent and can still work fine, just because they are old and they're older than the rest of the employees, they will get fired.
The third phase of oppression is powerlessness. In this sense, powerlessness refers to the way in which workers are divided and segmented into jobs with autonomy and authority, and jobs with little or no autonomy and authority. Essentially, this just means that many people's futures are not open-ended as we would like to believe, and in many cases they are firmly predetermined. For example, kids are always told the sky is the limit and they can be whatever they want as long as they work hard to achieve their goals. But in most cases, this is a fantasy. Studies have been conducted where identical resumes are sent out to employers with one having a generic white name on it and the other having an ethnic-sounding name. In every study, the resume with the Caucasian-sounding name got significantly more responses from hiring managers. This is a direct example of someone's powerlessness when it comes to striving to reach his or her goals. Many minorities face barriers to success that have to be broken through in order to prove their worth. However, the odds are firmly stacked against them. The power always lies with the dominant social group who are more willing to invest in the human capital of people who they are more like.
The fourth phase of oppression is cultural imperialism. The Cambridge Dictionary defines cultural imperialism as a culture of a large and powerful country, organization, etc., having a great influence on another less powerful country. This can be seen in a variety of ways that is both big and small. A simple way of looking at it is how the idea of McDonald's is traditionally an American fast food restaurant, but can be found in countries across the world. American median-driven industries that focus purely on profits expanded to foreign nations with different cultural values, which in turn influences their culture and forces American values onto it.
A more historic example is when the Europeans came to the New World and took over the Native Americans' land, pushing forward European culture upon the natives, or even worse, killing them. An example where one group of people takes over another group and forces their culture upon them is the purest form of cultural imperialism. Within America, homosexuals, Hispanics, blacks, and women have all had to conform to the dominant culture of the white male. Society is shaped by their values, and all other minorities have to conform to their cultural values.
Oppressed groups experience violence that is directed at them simply because they are members of that group. Living with the idea that they are liable to violation through random, unprovoked attacks solely on account of their group identity deprives them from freedoms and dignities that others are free to experience. The only motive behind these attacks is to damage, humiliate, or destroy the person. The social context around violent acts has portrayed them as warranted and acceptable, which has contributed to keeping the oppressed group subordinate. As an example of racially motivated violence, you may recall the story of Trayvon Martin. George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch volunteer, thought that Martin looked suspicious as he walked home from the local convenience store. Zimmerman placed a call to the Sanford Police Department, and despite being told not to follow, he did. Soon an altercation ensued, which led to Martin being fatally shot. Zimmerman was acquitted of all the charges. This ties into the systematic belief that group violence is seen as warranted or legitimate because we often tolerate it by allowing perpetrators to receive lighter punishments. There are thousands of other examples. However, the media does not necessarily touch on them, and we're unlikely to hear about them in the news. Another example that we can look at is violence against women. 1/3 of all women experience attempted or successful sexual assaults, simply for the fact that women are seen as sexually available or vulnerable. There are examples of this daily, however, society places blame on women rather than their perpetrators. A final example we'll look at is violence against gays and lesbians. It's not only common but increasing with the new marriage laws. One glaring example is when 32-year-old Mark Carson was shot in the face while walking down the streets of New York City with his companion. All of these examples show that violence is systematically encouraged against oppressed groups, and although it may be acted out on an individual basis, the roots of oppressions are within our system.
And that's all, folks.